She stood there with her clipboard like she owned the world, pointing at me with that fake authority voice. "You can't fish here. You're being fined $1,000. My jaw clenched because this wasn't even a community pond, it was my family's spot, passed down from my grandfather. But she didn't care. She waved that HOA paper in my face like it was the law, her red nails tapping against it as if she had already won. I could see neighbors watching from their porches, whispering like I was some criminal. Inside, I wanted to laugh because she had no idea who she was messing with. Instead, I stayed calm, reeled in my line, and said slowly, "Karen, you're writing the wrong man up." That made her furious. She stomped closer, heels sinking in the dirt, and screamed loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you don't pay, we'll take your house next." That hit me hard, not because I believed her, but because she wanted everyone else to. She thrived on humiliation, making people scared to stand against her. One guy shook his head, muttering, "Man, just pay her, she always wins." That was the moment I knew I couldn't just let this slide. She thought I was weak, just another homeowner she could bully into silence. What she didn't know was that I had been planning something for weeks. Because this wasn't the first time she tried to push me out. She had already slapped me with fake violations, threatened to tow my truck, even told my son he couldn't play in our own yard without approval. But when she came for my fishing rod, she crossed the wrong line. I folded the paper, slipped it into my pocket, and smiled at her, which only made her angrier. "You'll regret this," she hissed. And maybe I would, if I didn't already have the trump card in my back pocket. I didn't tell her then, but I had quietly bought the rights to the entire lake 2 weeks earlier. Every drop of water, every patch of grass around it, legally mine. She thought she was pulling the strings, but she was just dancing into a trap I had set with patience. And as I packed up my gear, I whispered just loud enough for her to hear, "Careful, Karen. Sometimes the fisherman owns the lake." She froze, confused, maybe even a little nervous, but covered it with another fake laugh. She strutted off like she had won, yelling, "We'll see about that." But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that tomorrow the entire neighborhood was about to find out whose rules really mattered. HOA fined me for fishing. "So I bought the lake," I muttered under my breath, and for the first time in weeks, I actually smiled. The next morning, the neighborhood group chat exploded, screenshots flying everywhere of a new sign I had placed at the lake entrance. Big bold letters, "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Karen must have nearly choked on her morning coffee because she was the first one storming down the street, phone in hand, recording herself like she was a news reporter. "This man thinks he owns the lake. This is community land," she shouted, waving her arms as neighbors started gathering around. Some laughed nervously, others looked confused, but I stood there calm, holding the deed in my hand. When she tried to snatch the sign out of the ground, I raised the paper high and said, "Go ahead, Karen. Rip it down. But make sure the judge sees it on camera when I take you to court." For a moment, the crowd went silent. Everyone stared at the paper. Karen's smile twitched and she started sputtering. "This is fake. This is fake. He forged this." But one of the older neighbors stepped forward, squinting at the county seal. Karen, that looks real." Her face turned red, but she doubled down, screaming, "No! The HOA owns everything here. We make the rules." That's when I delivered the line that shifted the whole neighborhood. "You don't own this lake, I do. And starting today, none of you are allowed to set foot here without my permission." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A couple of teenagers groaned, realizing their summer swimming spot was gone. One dad muttered, "Wait, so we're banned?" I nodded. "Until further notice. HOA wanted to fine me for fishing, so now nobody fishes. Simple as that." Karen's eyes widened like she had just lost a war she didn't even know she was fighting. She tried to shout over me, waving her phone at the neighbors like she was rallying troops. "Don't listen to him. He can't do this." But people were already whispering, "If he owns the deed, then yeah, he can." That was when she snapped. She pointed straight at me and yelled, "Call security. He's trespassing on his own land." A couple of her so-called HOA enforcers actually showed up. 2 guys in cheap uniforms with fake badges clipped to their belts. They strutted over like they were about to drag me away, and Karen barked, "Arrest him now." My heart pounded, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I pulled out my phone and hit play on a recording I had saved. The audio filled the air. Karen's voice from yesterday, clear as day. "If you don't pay, we'll take your house next." The crowd erupted in shock. The fake cops froze, realizing they were suddenly part of a very public mess. I leaned closer and said, "Funny thing about recordings. County officials love them, especially when they show extortion and impersonating law enforcement." Karen's face drained of color. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. Karen's silence didn't last long. She lunged forward, snatching at my phone like a wild animal, shrieking, "Delete that! You can't record me without permission." But I stepped back, holding it high, my smile only making her angrier. Neighbors pulled out their own phones, recording every second. And suddenly Karen realized she wasn't just fighting me. She was fighting an entire audience. One woman muttered, "Wow." She really said that to him. Another whispered, "This is going viral." Karen turned on the so-called security guards, barking at them, "Do something! Arrest him now!" But they hesitated, looking more like kids caught sneaking into a bar than actual officers. I raised an eyebrow. "You boys want to play cops? Go ahead. Just remember, impersonating law enforcement carries a 10-year prison sentence." One of them swallowed hard, unclipped the badge from his belt, and shoved it into his pocket. The other muttered, "We're out," and walked off, leaving Karen screaming after them, her face twisted in pure rage. She pointed at me, voice cracking, "You think you've won? You haven't. I'll call the real police, and when they get here, you're going to jail for harassment, for trespassing, for—" She kept piling on fake charges like she was reciting from a playbook. I just stood there, calm, watching her dig her own grave with every word. Finally, I cut her off with one simple sentence. "Call them, please. I'd love for the sheriff to see this deed himself." That stopped her cold. She blinked, realizing the trap she'd walked into, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. So she dialed, putting on her sweetest fake victim voice. "Hello, yes, I need an officer right away. I'm being threatened on community property." The neighbors looked at each other, some shaking their heads, some clearly enjoying the show. 20 minutes later, a patrol car rolled up. The sheriff himself stepped out, a tall man with a stern face I knew very well. Karen rushed to him like she had found her savior, pointing at me and screaming, "That's him. Arrest him. He forged a deed and threatened me." The sheriff didn't even look at me first. He looked straight at her. "Karen," he said, his voice heavy, "we've had complaints about you before. I think it's time we cleared this up." I handed him the deed without a word. He scanned it quickly, then nodded. "This checks out. The lake's his. Which means you're the one trespassing, not him." Karen's mouth fell open, but before she could speak, I pulled out my phone again. "Sheriff, there's one more thing you should hear." And I hit play on the recording of her threatening to take my house. The sheriff's jaw tightened as the words echoed through the crowd. Karen stammered, trying to spin it. "That's out of context. He's twisting my words." But nobody believed her anymore. The sheriff slipped the phone into his vest pocket and said quietly, "That's evidence, ma'am. You might want to stop talking." The crowd was buzzing, whispers turning into laughter, and for the first time, Karen looked cornered. Karen's face went pale, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. She crossed her arms and hissed, "You can't do this to me. I am the HOA. I make the rules." The sheriff raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "That's not how this works, ma'am. HOA rules don't override county law, and they definitely don't override property deeds." The neighbors murmured, some chuckling under their breath. It was like watching a queen stripped of her crown in the middle of the street. But Karen wasn't finished. She spun around, desperate to salvage her power, and shouted at the crowd, "All of you! Don't you see what's happening? He's taking your lake away! He's ruining our neighborhood." She tried to rally them against me, hoping to turn their fear into fuel. But instead, a man in the back, someone she had once fined for having his trash can out too long, spoke up. "No, Karen, you ruined this place. Maybe now we'll finally get peace." That hit her like a slap. She froze, scanning the faces around her, realizing nobody was stepping up to defend her. Even her closest allies stayed quiet, pretending to check their phones or look away. For once, she was truly alone. The sheriff cleared his throat. "Karen, I'm going to ask you to step aside. You've been warned before about harassment, and now I've got a recording in my possession that doesn't look good for you." He motioned for her to move, but she dug her heels into the dirt. "No, if you think I'm leaving, you'll have to drag me out." The tension spiked. For a second, it looked like she might actually get herself arrested right there. But instead of grabbing her, the sheriff calmly radioed for backup. That was the final straw. Karen's confidence cracked. She backed up, pointing a trembling finger at me. "This isn't over. I'll ruin you for this." You'll regret ever crossing me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten her. I just looked her in the eye and said, Karen, you should have thought about that before you tried to take my house. The crowd went quiet. People were recording, whispering, waiting to see what came next. Karen stormed off, muttering under her breath, but the sheriff followed her to make sure she didn't cause more chaos. The neighbors began dispersing, buzzing with excitement like they'd just witnessed a live drama show. But as I stood there watching her retreat, I knew it wasn't finished. People like her didn't stop, they plotted. And deep down, I had a feeling the next move she made would be even uglier. That night, as I locked up, I noticed something strange. A white envelope slid under my front door. No name, no stamp. Just one line scrawled across the front. You don't know who you're dealing with. I picked up the envelope, my gut tightening. The handwriting was jagged, almost scratched into the paper like someone wanted me to feel the anger behind every letter. I opened it carefully, half expecting some cheap scare tactic, but what I found made my blood run cold. Inside was a single printed photo, my truck parked in my driveway with a red X drawn across it in marker. Beneath it, the words, "Next time it burns." For a moment, I just stood there staring, the weight of it sinking in. This wasn't just HOA nonsense anymore. This was a threat against my property, my family. My son was asleep upstairs, and I couldn't shake the thought of what would happen if these people actually followed through. Karen wanted me rattled, wanted me scared enough to give up. Instead, it lit a fire in me. I locked every door and window, then pulled out the small black case from under my bed. Inside was a camera kit, professional-grade surveillance gear I hadn't used in years. Before I was a homeowner, before I was just the guy fishing at the lake, I had spent a decade in the military running intel operations. Karen had no clue that the man she was threatening was trained to spot enemies in the dark. By midnight, I had cameras hidden in the trees, motion sensors set up along the driveway, and a live feed streaming straight to my phone. I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, lights off, watching every flicker on the screen. At 2:37 a.m., I caught movement. 2 figures creeping near the edge of my property, dressed in dark hoodies, moving like they thought they were invisible. One of them carried a gas can. My pulse quickened, but I stayed still, recording every second. They walked straight toward my truck, whispering and glancing around nervously. One pulled out a lighter, flicking it open with a spark. That was enough. I stepped outside quietly, shotgun in hand, the night air cold against my skin. "Don't move," I said, my voice cutting through the dark. The lighter froze midair. Both figures spun, and for a moment their faces caught the glow. 2 young guys I recognized as Karen's so-called HOA security. Their bravado vanished instantly. One dropped the gas can, hands shooting up, stammering, We were just joking." I kept the barrel low but steady. "You were about to joke my truck into ashes. Lucky for you, I don't miss." I nodded toward the blinking red light of the camera above us. Smile for the county prosecutor. The 2 idiots bolted, sprinting into the night, but not before I got crystal clear footage of their faces. I didn't chase them. I didn't need to. By morning, the sheriff would have everything he needed. Still, as I stood there in the quiet, the thought hit me hard. Karen wasn't bluffing anymore. She was escalating. And if I didn't shut her down soon, the next target might not be my truck. It could be my home, or worse, my family. By sunrise, I was already at the sheriff's office, thumb drive in hand. The deputy at the front desk barely glanced at me until I said the words, "Arson attempt, caught on camera." That got me escorted straight to the back. The sheriff himself leaned over my shoulder as I played the footage, his jaw tightening with every frame. The gas can, the lighter, the faces, there was no denying it. When the video ended, he exhaled slowly and said, "Those boys just signed their own arrest warrants, and if Karen sent them, she's about to go down with them." I didn't have to say anything. He could see it in my eyes. I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for protection. My family, my home, my land. The sheriff nodded and promised, "We'll handle this. But keep your guard up. People like her, they get desperate when they know they're cornered." By noon, the arrests were already happening. The 2 wannabe enforcers were hauled out of their apartments in handcuffs, shouting that Karen made them do it, that it wasn't their idea. Neighbors filmed the whole thing, cheering as the patrol cars pulled away. Karen tried to save face, storming into the street in her robe, screaming, "This is harassment. They're innocent." But when the sheriff's cruiser rolled up behind her, lights flashing, the crowd fell silent. He stepped out holding the same thumb drive I had given him. "Karen, we need to talk." She crossed her arms, chin high, but her voice trembled. "I don't have to say anything without a lawyer." The sheriff smirked slightly. "That's the smartest thing you've said all week. But just so you know, conspiracy to commit arson is a felony. And we've got 2 witnesses pointing their fingers at you." The neighbors gasped, whispers spreading like wildfire. Phones were out, recording every second. Karen's face drained of color, but she still tried to twist it. "This is a setup. He's framing me because he hates the HOA. He hacked that video." Her lies sounded weaker now, desperate. Nobody believed her anymore. I stepped forward, not raising my voice, just letting the words cut through. "Karen, you tried to burn down my truck. You threatened my home. You crossed a line you can't step back from." The sheriff placed a hand on her shoulder, firm. "Ma'am, you're under investigation. I suggest you come quietly." She shook him off, flailing. "Don't touch me." "I built this neighborhood? You can't just—" But the sheriff's patience had run out. Within seconds, her hands were cuffed behind her back, and the crowd erupted, some cheering, some filming, some just stunned to see the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA dragged away in broad daylight. As the cruiser door slammed shut, I caught one last glimpse of her, eyes burning holes through me, lips mouthing words I couldn't hear. Maybe it was a threat, maybe it was a promise. Either way, she was finished, or at least that's what I thought, until my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. 3 words, no sender. "She isn't alone." The message shook me more than I expected. She isn't alone. My first thought was that Karen had more people waiting in the shadows, people who actually knew how to play dirty. I checked the live feed from the lake. Everything was quiet, but the thought of unknown threats made the hair on my arms stand up. I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't over. Karen might be behind bars for now, but the war she started was bigger than just her. By mid-afternoon, more HOA members started showing up near the lake, pretending to be concerned neighbors. They whispered, taking photos of my property, pointing and trying to intimidate anyone who came close. One of them even left a note on my gate. "You'll regret this. She'll get what she wants." My smile stayed calm, but inside I was already planning the next move. I called the sheriff and handed over all the new footage, including the strangers lurking around the lake. "This isn't just harassment anymore," I said. "This is organized, and it's about to escalate if we don't act." The sheriff agreed and promised increased patrols, but I knew that wasn't enough. Karen had set the tone, showing people that intimidation could work, and there were others willing to follow her lead. That night I walked the perimeter of my property, flashlight in hand, thinking about how to make sure my family and the lake were completely untouchable. I had to think bigger. This wasn't about fishing fines anymore. It was about asserting control in a way Karen and her minions couldn't touch. By dawn, I had drawn up a new plan. I would strengthen my legal claim over the lake, make sure every inch of the surrounding property was documented, and post clear notices. Trespassing by anyone associated with the HOA would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I even hired a local lawyer to file an injunction preventing any HOA member from entering my land. Every move was strategic, every step calculated. Late that evening, as I sat reviewing the security footage, I noticed movement on one of the cameras near the far end of the lake. A figure was crouched low, trying to avoid detection. I zoomed in, masked, hooded, someone clearly scouting the property. My heart raced, but I felt ready. I had trained for situations like this before, and now it was more than a personal fight. It was a battle to protect my home and send a message. Nobody, not even an entitled HOA, could bully me, I whispered under my breath. "Bring it on," because I'm not backing down. The next morning, the masked figure returned, this time bolder, stepping closer to the lake under the cover of fog. I was waiting, hidden behind the trees, motion sensor lights ready, phone streaming live to the sheriff. As the figure moved toward the water, I stepped out, voice low but commanding. "Stop right there. You're trespassing." The person froze, then slowly turned, and my heart skipped a beat.